Wake up!
Today, my wife literally slapped me and woke me up when there is an incident occurred. So today is day 2. Today we are going to explore, literally see what is a security incident actually. So can you guys differentiate between what is a security event, what is a security breach, and what is an incident? So don't afraid about it. So I am going to show you everything. Today we are also going to explore the different stages of an incident, okay, and I will show you what are the different type of incident that can happen to your SOC. So without doing any further delay, let's jump into the session and let's see what I have for you guys. So first, we will see what is actually a incident, what is a breach, and what is an event. So let me draw it over here. So first thing we are going to discuss about an event, then is an incident, okay, and then finally is a breach. Okay, so I have seen there are many such scenarios where we analysts tend to miss between those the concept. Okay, so security event, or we can say event, it could be anything that is happening on your system or whatever you are monitoring. Okay, so there could be a simple like login issue, login event, logout event. There might be a user creation, whatever may be. So if there is anything that is happening in your system, we would consider this as an event. Okay, now incident is something which is very much related to an event. Now we call it an incident that which can lead to a violation of an organization security policy. Okay, so we would come to an example that would be helpful to you understand what is the difference between an event and an incident. So and last thing, that is that we call about a security breach, which is again related to a security incident. Now breach, we call something that event when a security incident like in a broader term, basically breach is a type of incident. Okay, now when there is any organization data that might be under risk, okay, and some attacker or there is some unauthorized access on your organization data due to an incident, we call it as a breach. Okay, so three main terms. So if you go by like GCHQ classification also, so there has been some three different major steps that we mainly concerned about. So these three are main different things. Okay, so don't get confused over the things. So now let's see with some real life example. So let us assume that you are monitoring one computer or like or a server. Okay, so now one day there is an event when you see that there is an account got created. Okay, so account creation. So on suppose some time of event, you identified there is a one account got creation. Now we call it as an event. Okay, now being an incident responder, you identify that. Okay, now your this account creation activity is not looking somehow, it's like tallying to a legitimate activity. Okay, so you tend to identify what is that account got created. You get all the details of this account creation, what is happened on that system. Okay, now when you see what is the activity, whatever all thing happened on an incident, now after investigation you identified somehow that is not related to, or it is not an actual legitimate case. Okay, so you then call it as an incident. Okay, so because this account creation activity, what is has happened, what has taken place into your system, might lead to a situation that some unauthorized attacker or unauthorized user could hamper or could take possession of your data which they are not supposed to get. Okay, so this is an incident. Okay, now this account creation activity will be called upon incident, and it will be incident only till the time, suppose this is an user account got created. Okay, so this is a user account got created. Now this user, suppose got access to a server on your maybe on your data, on your like PC or something, data center. Now using that access, they have there might be, so this user is not an authorized user, we already identified. Now there might be a system which is in cloud, so this might be an infrastructure of an attacker infrastructure. Okay, now using that access to your server, attacker has dumped all the data to their cloud infrastructure. And also you have observed that this data is not only visible by this attacker, they have accessed over the server data, they have also dumped the data to their cloud infrastructure. Now this situation we called is as a breach. Okay, now you identified, right, you got the overall idea what is a security event, breach, and incident. So all these three things are very much related to each other. So when you are working as an incident responder, it's very much important that you can identify between the facts, what is an incident, what is event, and what is a breach. So don't get confused, it's very simple. So if you have identified one, so let's say your SIM has thrown and one security. So now some question must ask, then what is a security alert? Okay, so alert, then offense, like all these terms are very much related to your SIM tool that you might be using. So your event, security event, are getting stored on on the backend database of your SIM architecture. Okay, that could be a cold storage, that could be a hard storage, anything, warm storage, sorry, anything. So those are events that is getting saved onto your backend server. Okay, now all those security events are getting analyzed and getting parsed through the SIEM rule logics. Okay, so you write your use case, you write your like detection rule, we call is that detection rule. Okay, so if the detection rule is matches to a certain condition on top of your security event, an alert gets generated. Okay, so that is a security alert. Now it's upon you that whether you decide that alert or offense is worth enough to classify as an incident. So okay, so you need to go back and check your organization architecture, organization data classification, how they have identified what is an incident and what is not. Okay, so these things are very much related, where you need to actually identify what is an event and what is a breach. Okay, so now we will move on and let's see what next we are about to show you. Now we will talk about the types of security incident. Okay, so let's say I will show you the types of security incident through the cyber kill chain classification. Okay, so cyber kill chain, I have already told you what are the different phases of cyber kill chain. Now I thought to explain different types of security incident that can happen to your SOC through the kill chain process, so that you can like map easily, very convenient way to identify what is where, what is when happening. Okay, so let's jump into that. Okay, so the first stage that we call is a reconnaissance stage. So now there could be several incident we call as a reconnaissance. So let me put it down here. So might be your attacker is scanning your network. Okay, so and we could consider this as a scanning event. Okay, so this is one type of incident that can happen to your SOC. So again, this is very much important that you can tell me I don't have any action to take on this recon event, okay? But always remember that whenever there is a scanning happening, that means someone is targeting your network, and obviously there would be several other attackers that could be scanning your network. So you need to identify that what are their TTPs. When I say TTP, I tend to use this term very much. So tool, techniques and procedure. Okay, so this is a high level term that is used to identify how the attacker is actually moving. Okay, so you get mainly the scanning activities on your perimeter level. So they tend to identify where is your architecture, how is your server placed, what are your vulnerabilities, all those stuffs you can get on this recon phase. Okay, so just remember and just try to identify their TTPs. So probably you could not, you may not actually to take a immediate action on a scan event, but down the line that could save you from happening a broader like incident or a breach. Okay, so next step is prioritization. So this prioritization steps is actually omitting in the like traditional cyber kill chain phase. So prioritization we are skipping. So weaponization. Okay, weaponization is a phase where attacker would actually prepare their tools which they actually want to deliver to your network. Okay, so weaponization is a stage which so if you want to take up about an incident which is relating to weaponization, there might not be a real case example, but to tell you about something, like I would show you that cyber squatting, okay, one could happen. You can Google about it. So cyber squatting is an incident where suppose you work on ABC organization, okay, so and your organization has a website called abc.com. Now one day, so your threat intel guys, so threat intel guys are like, you might have a third party vendor which keep on scanning the internet to identify if there is anything matching related to your organization or not. So one day they have identified, so your organization email domain is abc.com. Now one day they identified one abc.com. okay, so this looks like similar, okay, but it's not actually a legit domain. So we call it as cyber squatting. So this kind of incident can happen to your SOC, which can lead to a weaponization phase. That means this kind of page can be easily moved and can be easily penetrated to your customers, and that can be fed to your customers using a legitimate authorization way by which they would trust their website. So it will be identical ditto copy of your website. Okay, so you can Google and you can read about it. This is one example of weaponization. Okay, so there could be several other ways. So might be from related to the scanning event, you can identify that maybe you identified one attacker IP address, okay, from or let's say one domain of your of an attacker. Okay, so you identified one domain, and using that domain, let's say you identified one server information. Okay, so that server might be an attacker server. Okay, let me write it down here. So in that server, when you just try to access that server, that could give you huge number of attacking tools, then scanning, I can say methodologies, then different types of ideas, anything. So that could also be an incident to your SOC, whether you could identify someone is actually trying to create some weapon to deliver that. Okay, so this could be very much interesting stuff where actually you could like correlate between these two stages, weaponization and reconnaissance, and plan up your use case. Next thing is avoid traps. Okay, this is a very interesting phase. So in traditional kill chain, you won't find that in any way. So avoid traps means your organization might have, like honeypot. Okay, then your organization might have AV, your organization might have a VM, which you might be scanning or using as a honeypot. So many of an attacker tend to scan, again recon, your attack like the honeypot phases, and they would by some tools and techniques they would easily identify with that it's a honeypot and that's not your actual server. Okay, so using that way they would move on to your next the next device. Okay, so like that way they would avoid traps. So also in AV, okay, so in your AV also there are similar fashion that I have already explained in past, like your malware might be having some kind of like methodology by which they can shut down your AV, or even your AV is like they can boot up even before your AV boots up. Okay, so those are like avoid traps techniques. So you can get some kind of incident where you're actually, you can see someone is scanning your honeypot and they are not actually dropping something, or they are trying to exploit that honeypot, rather they are moving to a next hop. Okay, so they are trying to scan different like segments of your network. So that could be a box scan, that could be a vertical scan. So if you don't have an idea what is box scan, vertical scan, let me know in the comment section, I'd be happy to help. Okay, so next thing, moving on, delivery. Okay, so remember this phase is very much important, and most of the SOC guys and SOC incidents come from this delivery stage. So I would say that if you are working on a matured SOC, you would definitely have an antivirus solution or an EDR solution. When I say EDR, it's like endpoint detection mechanism, or like tool, whatever you can identify. So EDR would definitely raise an alert. So again, I told you about the alert, right? The offense alert. So that's not from SIM, but from AV anyway. And your AV logs would be also might be fed into your SIM. So your this kind of thing is called as a security event. Okay. So your so suppose one day your so someone scanned your network and identify one vulnerability on your network, maybe on perimeter level, and they have exploited your perimeter level. Now using that, they have just dropped a drive-by malware. Okay, drive-by malware. Okay, so drive-by malware also might be coming in like phishing attack. So that is another example of attack or even security event that might be coming in your way. Okay, so drive-by attack can happen by which they can drop a malware to your one of your server, let's say, which is your web server, which is open to the internet. Okay, now your AV tool has raised or logged that as an event. Now when your AV tool just logged that drive-by malware had dropped in the system, your detection rules on your AV system would raise an alert. That is an incident for you, because that is an unauthorized activity that is happening on your server. Okay, so you try that to catch up that, and you try to do the other phases that would be coming up in a minute. What are the other stages of incident and how you can handle? But that is one example that drive-by malware can be dropped in your machine. Okay, so when we say about delivery phase, there are a lot of other examples that phishing email can arrive. Then phishing attempt might be happening to your customers or your employees. Then again, rightful method of delivery could also be, like one day an attacker just dropped an exploit code, or just given a exploit code on your server, or injected a script or a shell code on your server. So all this kind of like the how can I say that, if an attacker is just dropping something on your machine or on your server, anything like endpoints basically, that we call as a delivery. So that means they are delivering something which is unauthorized. Okay. Next thing is called an exploitation. Okay, so exploitation example is a very familiar. If you are, again, exploitation can be catched if you are having an like EDR solution or antivirus solution is in place. So exploitation would be that stage when your attacker is doing some recon and they have identified that your system is having some vulnerability. So using that information about your server, they would try to exploit that. Okay, and how they would try to exploit? Using the delivery mechanism. Okay, so they might have just dropped an shell code on your server, and that shell code is basically a code which is trying to exploit the vulnerability that they have identified in the recon phase. That is one example of exploitation. Okay, so next phase is installation. So installation is a phase where basically they would try to like install the several other dependencies. So you can have an incident in your SOC that your server, which is a legitimate server, is an event occurred in your server which is creating an user. Okay, and that example I took in the very first place. So maybe an account creation. Okay, account creation. Then I would say that software installation, maybe a VM got loaded. Okay, a VM got loaded into your server. Okay, so that is a method of installation. So you might be getting some alerts from your AV system or from your SIM tool that a third-party account got created, or a software or a VM got loaded onto your box. Okay, but just remember, all of this incident and all of the event would only come if you have the proper use case and the place. Okay, so I would come that in next phases, what are the preparation stage that you need to go on. But just to give you an example, next stage is the C2 phase. We all know about the command and control server, and this phase you will get the maximum number of incident on your SOC, because whatever the SOC I have worked on, they are like not so much matured that they would try to identify the attack in those phases. If you are able to identify, you are like best. Okay, but believe me, it's not happened like that way. So C2 communication, you would identify that your server is communicating to a suspicious domain, suspicious IP address, then anything. Okay, and you can create your use case based on your threat intel information. So suppose I told you right about you need to read 50 blogs per day, and using that inference you identified some like hundreds of IOCs that could be that is trending in today's cyber world. Okay, so you just dropped a rule on your SIM tool to just kick off one alert if one of your system is communicating to one of those IOCs. So that is one incident for you. Okay, so we call it as a C2 incident. Or your C2 also kind of incident that would be happening, that one of your server is trying to scan like unnaturally to other servers who is sitting behind that. Okay, so that is one incident that can happen to your SOC, because when that stage also crossed, like the installation is complete, they would try to move on to the next hop to identify if there is any privilege activity or a privileged user is present on the on the other server. Okay, so like that way they would try to move on. So you would identify scanning activity happening suddenly from a unknown server, which is never should behave like that way. Okay, that can happen. And finally, action on targets and hide tracks. So these two things, hide tracks, you rarely get any incident, but action on targets, you get a lot of incidents similar to your C2 communication. Suppose your communication might be a large number of outbound activity happening, large number of upload happening, then structured way of upload happening. Then maybe you can see some communication is happening on like FTP port, then maybe SSH port, then some like high number of ports, okay, uh, which is not known, by the way, okay, high number of ports. Okay, so those kind of thing might be an interesting thing to identify what is an action and objective, like what is happening to your environment. So you would definitely try to identify that. If that something, some kind of communication is happening, that means your system might be already compromised. They have already done all the phases. Now they are trying to dump the data to your to the attacker third party server or attacker infrastructure. Okay, so that phase we call it as a breach. So also we have identified that, classified that. Okay, so this is like through the cyber kill chain, this is like, you know, like overall type of incident that can happen to your SOC. Okay, so now the next thing we will move on, and we will identify that what are the different phases of an incident that can happen. Okay, so you can see this same kind of logos in my channel background also. Okay, so the first thing that we call it as a planning phase. Okay, so now let's see how you can do a proper planning. So when I say the planning, that includes like you need to collaborate with specific teams and individuals who are actually responsible for taking the each steps of your incident and response process. Okay, so first thing in planning, we would say that planning means define the set of people who would actually take the responsibilities of your incident. Okay, define action items. Next stage, define what type of which security event you need to classify as an incident. So that depends on your organization priorities, data classification, and the architecture. Okay, so you need to identify what is an incident. Okay, because for me, if I want to work in cloud SOC, might be malware investigation or something similar might not be an incident for me, but if you are working on a IT SOC, that could be an incident for you. Okay, so you need to classify what is an incident. Okay, third stage, you need to identify what is your critical data. We call is a crown jewel. Okay, so in like terms of IT terms, so you need to classify what is your crown jewel. Once you identify that, depending on that, you have to set up your priorities of your planning system. Okay, so until unless you do that, you cannot prioritize one incident. Okay, so and also you cannot classify what is a breach and what is not, because if you don't know what is a crown jewel or what is a critical system you want to protect, you won't be able to put up a security incident plan. Okay, so next that thing that I need to be assured of, that a way to preserve the systems. Okay, so suppose one of your system might got hacked and you need to kick off your forensic investigation. So in that phase, you need to identify the ways to preserve your artifacts. Okay, ways to preserve artifacts. That means you might need to find a way to preserve your logs, then preserve your compromised systems. That could be a raw format or a zip format, whatever maybe. So you need to define that how you want to preserve your data for how many period or what is the extension time by which you can actually store the data. So that also depends on some legal inputs also. Okay, so if you are working on a bank industry, they might be have a longer term of like data storing option, but if you are not, so that might be you might have 45 days or 90 days depending on your architecture. So that's also you need to define. And last thing, that you also need to do the planning whom to notify. Okay, so if you are planning or if you are if you have a plan to put up or like the SOC plan or invest IR plan basically, so you don't need to notify each and every people of your organization of about an security incident is happening. So maybe if there is a severity 1 incident or save 0 incident, which is basically a blocker, so you might need to call up your CISO. Okay, and if there is any need for that to involvement of customer, of you identified that your customer data is getting breached, so you might need to notify them as well. Okay, so you need to define the way whom to notify. That could be a user, that could be your higher authorities, that could be your legal team, anyone could be. Okay, so this is all these five stages of comprises your planning phase. Now, when an incident already taken place, now how actually you can identify that if your incident is already taken place, what is the next step? So that next step we call is as a detection. Okay, so when I say detection, so there are several stages. Okay, so first stage, when I say detection, means how actually you can identify the security event. So you need to come up with your use case. Okay, following up your use case, you need to define your detection rules. Okay, by that rules can be on your SIM, on your different kind of monitoring tool which basically you are using. Then once you define those rules, so you need to define the notification templates also. Okay, so I told you whom to notify, but the way of notification. Okay, so that is very much important, because I have seen several SOC where basically they use a ticketing tool, they use an email notification, they use PagerDuty, then use Opsgenie, lot of tools. So you need to identify how actually you want to notify about an incident. Okay, so when you identify about an incident and there is a incident already taken place, now you need to find a way to triage that incident. Okay, so the next phase would be containment, but is your between these two stages, which is like your detection phase and your containment phase, is your very much important time to which by which you would actually triage that incident. Okay, so when I say triage, you need to assess your logs, you need to bring up, you need to open a breach depending on your severity. You need to like pull everyone in that call who is actually responsible for that event. Okay, so that event may be, if there is a server is getting affected, you might be interested to get the server owner on the call. If you are not having any priorities of your privilege basically to access something on your on that server, you might be getting some server team, might be getting someone from the backend team, might be someone from database team, might be someone from firewall team, might be someone from network team, but you need to have everyone in the call when a security incident is happening. And using that information, whatever logs you are having, the logs can be from your like use case triggering SIM. Okay, that is one way of storing your logs. Then your other tools, like your SIM might not be having all of your logs, okay, which is required for triaging that incident. So you collect all those information, then you assess what is basically happened on that incident. Okay, depending on that, you identify what is the first step that you need to take to contain that incident. Okay, so when I say the contained of the incident, that means you need to stop, basically, to take the bad effect of that incident. Okay, so for example, if you have identified that one machine is getting breached and you have seen an outbound communication happening from a third party IP address, now you need to put up some plan to stop that communication. Maybe you block that IP address in firewall, maybe you block a domain in your proxy, or like, like to take up that server itself. So suppose you have identified that from one server one machine is communicating, so you want to take down that whole server. Okay, so take down means remove the server from the network. Okay, so if that is an endpoint, that is very easy, but if that is your server, so that's the reason I told you that you need the server owner on the call. Okay, so you need to identify that what are the like how you basically want to contain that situation. Okay, so once your containment is done, so next thing is very much important, that you go about your cleanup and recovery phase. Okay, so when I say about the cleanup and recovery, that means in these phases you kick off your broader investigation. Okay, so in this phase you might not need the full house, which like what you are using on the call. Maybe you can drop off from the call and you can tell them that, okay, the investigation or the incident is now contained. Okay, so this part, till this portion is very much important, and within your SLA you have to complete all those steps. Okay, so after that, cleanup and recovery is very much dependent on how actually you want to like how fast and how quickly you can assess your blast radius. So you can get all of your logs, you can kick off your forensic investigation. So forensic investigation means you can do a forensic on your network, then you can do on forensic on host, you can kick off your forensic on your user machines, like host anyway is a user machine, but the other aspects as well. So, and also you need to do a deep dive of log analysis to identify what is the blast radius of the incident. So suppose in this case, what we are talking about, you have identified one server. Okay, now when doing the after containment, while doing the forensic investigation and the further log analysis, you have identified the same kind of outbound communication is happening from your 10 of your servers. Okay, so that means from one server it got to a 10 server, so your blast radius is now increased. Okay, you have contained the situation. That means from your network, if one machine is not able to communicate to that suspicious IP address, none of your machine gonna communicate to that IP address, because that containment is done on your perimeter level. I'm giving just an example. So your containment could be anything. Okay, now, so your like your organization is not getting impacted further, but to identify what are the other servers, what are the other users, what are the other resources that might have been touched by the attacker, you need to do a full house investigation. So in that phase we call it as a full triage mode. Okay, so depending on that stage, you identify your cleanup procedure. So when you say that you take a cleanup procedure, that means you can maybe full scale rework on the server. Maybe you can like do a quick flush of your server and you can reinstall on your server. You can again like put up some steps, like let's say that you identify that what is the root cause of that communication. You identify that there is a process which might be responsible for triggering that like communication. Okay, so you want to clean up only that process and you want to kill that process. Okay, and you want to remove all the residue files which might be dropped by that process. Okay, so you catch up with your antivirus team and you gave them the hash value, you gave them the file name and the other IOCs related to that particular file, and you tell them, I want to clean up these IOCs from my whole network. Okay, so this is the step of your cleanup, like the way you are actually accessing your network and you are removing the traces whatever has been done by the attacker from your network. So once that step is done, you move on to a recovery phase. Okay, so recovery phase is like somehow dependent on your like you can tell it's like looking similar to my cleanup phase, but recovery is a stage if your attacker has destroyed, okay, one of your maybe backend server, backend database. You want to rephrase it or you want to recreate it. So if your attacker has created some third-party user accounts, you are cleaning that user account and you are creating some new user account using some strength or like a strengthened mechanism of security controls. Like you put up a very strong password policy, you put up a key rotation policy, many things you can put up. Okay, so that phase we call as a recovery phase. So once you are done with your recovery phase, is time for you to go to the last phase, which we called as a lesson learned. So in this particular phase, you are going to take up the steps by which you can identify and you literally do the planning that this kind of incident won't happen future to your network. Okay, so in that stage we might be concerned about like what are the lessons that you have learned. That means what are the difficulties, okay, you have faced. I would say a difficulty, what went good. Okay, so obviously you need to catch up and you need to tell your boss, okay, so see, these are the good stages that we have done while we are doing the investigation. What went bad? Okay, so this is very much again important because you need to take up the feedback from other analysts. What was your roadblocks to do the containment phase? Okay, so you have taken the containment, but maybe due to some reason you might be in a place that you lost the SLA. Okay, within the SLA you couldn't contain that investigation, so you need to jot down that point. Okay, and you need to, maybe you need some extra support from some of your other team members. So all those things you need to do the lesson learned phase. And finally, once your lesson learned is completed, you need to do the same feedback and you need to document all of your feedback so that you can do the planning from your next incident which might be underway. So you need to stay tuned for that. Okay, so one incident passed, that doesn't mean that that same kind of incident is going to not going to happen basically in future. Okay, so to avoid the same kind of incident, you need to do the planning. Okay, and for that planning you need to feed up all of your lesson learned, whatever you have learned from this detection phase, then containment, then cleanup and recovery through your planning step. Okay, so this thing is very much important, that until unless you complete the whole phases of investigation, the whole lesson learned phase, you might be in a position, you might not be in a position to identify or jot down what is went wrong and what is went good actually in an incident. So I have seen one incident, I have seen many incidents that has taken place in a SOC, and they have literally took years to complete that complete the investigation, complete the cleanup and recovery phase. Okay, so don't afraid about it too much, because not every incident in your SOC that is going to happen is like you just do a click and your server is up and running and you clean up that. Okay, so I have seen incident where like thousands of your user account get compromised, then thousands of your server get compromised, and it's not an easy job to clean up all your servers just by like 1 week or 1 month, okay, because there's a dependency on your business, okay. So that's the reason I told you in the first day you need to listen, you need to bring up your innovation skill, you need to brought up your listen skill to identify what is a business risk, what is not a business risk, okay. If I am lying, or if I am keeping my server like that way without doing the cleanup phase, if there is anything wrong that can happen to my environment, okay. So all those stuffs you need to take care of, and you need to do the proper planning, and you need to take all the phases to complete your investigation cycle, okay. So this is total overall the procedure and the investigation flow. So I hope you have learned something, and if you are facing some issues, or if you are if you are going to put up or take up a SOC role, I think you can manage somehow, and you know the basic ideas, okay. What are the different stages of incident, how an incident happen, what are the things that you need to look for if an incident occur, like that way, okay. So in the next stage and in next day, we are going to expose you that what is your first duty if you are in a SOC, and if you are like SOC has a different kind of roles, okay. So I talked about the roles in my days 1 episode, but there are other things also, like you need to take up on your first day of SOC, okay. So stay tuned for that, and please don't forget to subscribe if you have liked the content, and please give me a thumbs up if you like the content. And if you have any query, please tell me in the description box, is tell me in the comment section. Sorry, description box is locked. And if you have any suggestion also to for me to improve my session, also to improve other things, feel free to post that in the comment section, and share the content to your peers so that others also can learn from these free skills, okay. So if you are going down to the road of any like paid course, believe me, they are going to teach you the same thing what I am showing, because I am coming up from my real life experience, but they would be all things like a bookish knowledge, okay. But I hope this is interesting and you are enjoying the session. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.